How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Kuf Mem Tes. Yeah. Gewaldig. Daf Kuf Mem Tes. Daf 149 of Masechta BavaBasra. That's great. Okay, we're really moving ahead over here in Masechta BavaBasra. We're getting closer and closer every day. We're getting closer and closer. Wow. This has been a big mission. Masechta BavaBasra. All right, so we're going to start Daf Kuf Mem Tes Amud Aleph on the fourth line. They ask a kasha mocher kol nechasav mahu. Interesting. So if you have a shchiv mira who sold all of his stuff, but he sold it, so you got money for it. Okay. So if he Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rab im Omad eno chozer. So it says Rav Yehuda in the name of Rab. So actually you can add the word Zimnin Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rab. That sometimes we'll see, because we're going to see in a second. Sometimes he said something else. So sometimes Rav Yehuda Amar Rab said im Omad eno chozer, that if he survives, the gift stands. V'zimnin Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rab. But other times Rav Yehuda said the name of Rab im Omad chozer. If he survives, then the gift is voided. They don't argue. It depends. If he still has the money, so meaning he sold all of his stuff, but he kept the money. So the Rashbam explains that if he kept the money, so the implication being that he assumed that in the event that he survived, he would have the money to be able to buy it back. But if he needed the money in order to pay off a debt, right, and he paid off a debt with it, well then he wouldn't get back his stuff. Okay. What if a shchiv mira is mode? He says, look, this money is owed to so and so. Is he believed to say that the money really belongs to that person? Okay. So shchiv mira shahodamau. If he says, look, this money belongs to so and so, is he believed? Or the Rashbam points out that maybe it wouldn't be believed, because maybe just wants to make it look like his kids aren't necessarily inheriting all that much, but he doesn't want to make it necessarily seem like his children are inheriting a windfall. Is that the word? A windfall? A landfall? A windfall? Maybe a windfall? I don't know. So he says that there's all sorts of chayvis, but the truth is that it's not true. So what's the shaila? If he says that, does he just want to make it look like his kids aren't standing to inherit, that much, that people aren't, kind of prying in their eyes, right? So therefore, it's not really truthful, or is it truthful? Do we believe him? So. That's a kasha. I'm reading that again. What if a shchiv mira admits that, or right, that money belongs to somebody else? But he says that certain things belong to certain people. Tashma, come in. The Isser Giora, Isser the convert. Who is Isser the convert? Shmuel had two daughters who were taken captive. One of them was named Rachel. She had a son, Mari, right? Rav Mari bar Rachel, from Mechoza. So Rav Mari bar Rachel goes by his mother's name, not by his father's name, because his father is actually a convert. His mother conceived him. Rachel conceived Mari when Isser, the person, right, the father, was not yet Jewish. He was not Jewish at the time. By the time Mari was born, he was already Jewish, but at the time of conception, Isser was not Jewish. The father was not Jewish. And therefore, right, and he converted to Judaism. And because he converted to Judaism, so Mari, since he was in the time that he was conceived, his father was not Jewish. So first of all, he's called Mari bar Rachel, right? He goes by his mother's name, not his father's name. But also, right, a Gershon is Gayer, Kikot Shenola Dami. That when a person converts, it's considered like he's born without any family. He's born now. Any previous family is no longer his family. And therefore, Mari isn't technically his son. Mari would not inherit him. So the shaila is, so now as we're going to see in a second, Mari had some money, 12,000 zuzes. Where was that money? It was at Rava's house. He was keeping it at Rava's house. So now the shaila is, how can Isser Giora get the 12,000 zuzis over to his son Mari, because Mari doesn't automatically inherit him, since at the time that he was conceived, Isser was not Jewish. So Mari won't automatically inherit him. Now, what will automatically happen is that, well, since Isser doesn't have any other relatives, his property is going to be Hefker. His property is going to be Hefker. And if his property is Hefker, then whoever gets it, gets it. So now, if the 12,000 zuzis are at Rava's house, well, guess who stands to earn, well, I wouldn't say earn, but who stands to win 12,000 zuzis when Mari dies, when Isser dies? Rava, because he has 12,000 zuzis at Rava's house, and Rava Memele, it's in his property, he gets it. So Rava is looking forward to Isser's death, and looking forward, or probably more likely, looking forward to winning 12,000 zuzis. All Rava needs to do is just make sure that there's no way for Mari to get it. Right? If it was an inheritance, Mari would inherit it automatically, but there's no inheritance here. So Rava just needs to make sure that Mari is kept away from this money, and then it will become his, it will become Rava's when Isser dies. Okay, let's start over. So Tashma, the Isser Giora, Isser the convert, who was married to Rachel, the daughter of Shmuel, and whose son was Rav Mari, but technically speaking, according to inheritance laws, Rav Mari was not his son, since he was conceived when Isser was not Jewish. Havale Tracer Alfe Zuze Bey Rave. So Isser Giora had 12,000 zuzis at Rava's house. Rav Mari Brei, now Isser's son Rav Mari, Harasa Shalo B'Kedusha V'Ledos B'Kedusha Avoy. He was conceived when Isser was not Jewish, but he was born when Isser was already Jewish, when he had already converted. But because of that, since he was conceived when Isser was not Jewish, Rav Mari would not be considered his son to inherit him. Uve Rav Hava, okay, and Rav Mari was studying in the yeshiva at the time, okay. Omar Rav, now Rav Mari, Isser Giora was a Shchibmira at the time, okay. So now, Omar Rav, so Rava figures Rava is going to win 12,000 zuzis. Heichi nikninu Rav Mari, lani zuze. Because after all, technically speaking, there's no way for Isser to bequeath, or really for Rav Mari to be koneh, the 12,000 zuzis. And because, there's no way for him to be koneh, so Memele, it's going to become mine when Isser Giora dies, and I will receive it from Hefker. Ibi Yerusha la Bayushu, right? If we're talking about Rav Mari inheriting Isser Giora, he doesn't inherit Isser Giora, right? Again, because when he was conceived, Isser Giora was not yet Jewish. Ibn Matana, if we're talking about, Isser Giora can give it to him as a Matnas Shchivmira. Well, Matnas Shchivmira ki Yerusha Shaviyah Rabbanan. The rabbis treated a Matnas Shchivmira like Yerusha. Now, the Staka Machlokas Rishonim, that I'm actually not going to explain it like the Rashbam, because I think it makes more sense to explain it like the others. When someone is able to bequeath, well then, he's able to give a matna shchibmer. But if he's unable to bequeath, for example, Isser Giora, who's he going to bequeath to? There's nobody, he has no relatives, there's nobody to bequeath to. So therefore, he's not in the parsha of matna shchibmer. So therefore, there's no opportunity for him to give a matna shchibmer. The Rashbam says, talking about Rav Mari, since Rav Mari doesn't inherit, therefore he can't receive a matna shchibmer. Yeah. Anyways, the others say it's talking about since Rav Mari, since Isser isn't somebody who's able to bequeath, so therefore he's also not able to give matna shchibmer. Okay, so therefore that's not a possibility. Ibn Mashicha, and if we're talking about Rav Mari will go to his father, and he will be koneh the money b'meshicha. He'll pull it. So, okay, 1 second. Okay, fine. So let's nu gabe. Yeah, but the thing is that Isser Giora doesn't have the money. It's by me. I have the money. So how's Rav Mari going to do a kinyan meshicha? Iba Khalifin, maybe we'll do a Kinyan Khalifin, right? That Rav Mari can go to his father, to Isagiora's house, and Rav Mari can give Isagiora a handkerchief. If Isagiora picks it up, and by doing so, he gives the money to Rav Mari. Now the money is Rav Mari's, but as we learned in Masechet Bava Metzia, Perek Hazov, in Matbeh Nikne B'Chalifin, you can't be koneh money through a Kinyan Khalifin, so that's not an option. Agav Karka, well maybe you could be koneh Agav Karka. That Isagiora will be makne to Rav Mari a little bit of land, and then as we know, nechasim she'ein lehem achrayis niknin im nechasim she'esh lehem achrayis b'kesef shtar v'chazok. So therefore, Rav Mari Isagiora can be makne to Rav Mari a shtickle karke, and by Rav Mari being koneh the karke will also be koneh the money. But leis le'ara, but Isagiora doesn't have any property, so that's not an option either. Even Ma'amad Shloshtin, well, what about Ma'amad Shloshtin, right? As we learned back in Gittin, but also it's come up recently. Ma'amad Shloshtin, I think it came up recently. The Ma'amad Shloshtin is that, if, in this case, if Isagiora has 12,000 zuzas by Rava, if he kind of calls all three of them together for a powwow, right, Isagiora, Rava, and Rav Mari, well then, Isagiora could say to Rava, I have 12,000 zuzas by you, give them to Rav Mari, and since all three of them are there, so that would be valid, and Rava would give the money to Rav Mari. But Ishalach li lo azilna, says Rava, yeah, but go try. Isagiora is on his deathbed, he's not going anywhere. And if they call me for a powwow, I'm not coming. If I go, I'm going to lose 12,000 zuzas. I'm not going. So Maskef lo Ravika Breder Rav Ami, but then Ravika Breder Rav Ami asks, but Amai, but still, why is there no option? Vilode Isser Dalein Zuze de Rav Mari Ninu. Let Isser say that this money belongs. Let Isagiora say that this money belongs to Rav Mari. And if he says that it belongs to Rav Mari, then it belongs to Rav Mari. We believe him. It belongs to Rav Mari. Where am I? And therefore Rav Mari can be koneh that way. Adohachi nafak odisa mibei iser. And then, sure enough, because this was mentioned in the Beis HaMedrash, people were talking about it, and that's what actually ended up happening. Isser Giora said the 12,000 zuzas belongs to Rav Mari, and that was that, it belongs to Rav Mari. Ikpid Rava got frustrated. Omri says, they're teaching people, the arguments that they should make, the things that they should do, the loopholes that they should find, and I'm losing out. Right? Who said you should go and tell Isagiora to be moded that the 12,000 zuzas belongs to Rav Mari, now belongs to Rav Mari, and I just lost 12,000 zuz. Okay. So it sounds like you can be modeh. It sounds like being modeh that money belongs to somebody else works, is valid. Okay. Fine. Givaldic. Now, the Mishnah had continued and said, Shir Karka Kolshu, I'm at the top now of Kuf Mem Tes of Amud Beis. Shir Karka Kolshu Matnosu Kayem. So the Mishnah had said that if a Shchiv Mirah gives a gift, but he leaves over Karka Kolshu, we're going to have to explain what that means. I guess literally means a little bit of property. Well, then he preserved that for himself. And even if he survives, the gift stands because he reserved a little bit for himself. Okay. Fine. Okay. Right? Remember, if he gave away everything, well, then if he survived, it would be voided. But if he leaves a little bit of property for himself, the gift stands because he left something for himself. V'chama kol shehu. Oh. So now the shaila is, how much, what is karka kolshu? So, Amr of Yehuda Amar Rav, says of Yehuda in the name of Rav, karka kidei panasaso. Enough property that he could live off of. That if he survives, if he left for himself enough property that he would be able to live off of, and what he gave away as a gift, he can give away as a gift and still survive. So then the gift stands. But if there's not enough for him to be able to live off of, so then the gift would not stand. Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Omar metaltalin kedei panasaso. Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba is a chiddush, and he says not only property, but this applies even to metaltalin. If the Shchib Mira kept for himself enough metaltalin that he'd be able to live off of, maybe jewelry, whatever it is, things that he'd be able, enough value for him to be able to live off of. So again, the gift that he gave to somebody else would stand because he still has what he needs to live off of. So review this. So when it says karka kolshu, Rav Yehuda says the name of Rav, it's talking about property enough kidei panasaso, enough to live off of. And Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, he's not saying the name of Rav. Okay, but Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, I think we learned in Masechta Brachos, was the Talmud Muvak of Rav, I think. But Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba says metaltalin kidei panasaso, that this also applies to metaltalin if there's enough for him to live off of. Omar Reb Zera, and says Reb Zera kama mechavnon shmaitzo desave, and Reb Zera lauds, I don't know if that's the right word, but praises the fact that Rav Yehuda, Amarav, and Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba were so aligned. Because after all, karka taima mai, the ikoi somech ole. What was the reason why Rav Yehuda Amarav says that by karka, if he leaves enough for him to live off of, then the gift that he gave to somebody else stands? Well, because if he survives, then he will have what he needs to live off of. And therefore, metaltalin nami ikoi somech ilavayu. So therefore, the same would apply to metaltalin. Kilu, if he gave a gift but left for himself enough metaltalin so that if he survives, he would have what to live off of going forward, then that stands as well. So says Reb Zera, look, Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba and Rav Yehuda are completely aligned, because essentially it's the same logic for karka as well as metaltalin, which is, if there's enough for him to be able to survive off of, to live off of, then he has what he needs, and whatever he gave otherwise as a gift stands as a gift. So now, Maskefla of Yosef. So if Yosef asks a kasha, he says, one second. Reb Zera is blown away by how aligned Rav Yehuda and Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba are. Rav Yosef says, what's there to be so excited about? This makes absolutely, I don't understand Rav Yehuda and Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba at all. Rav Yosef asks, Umay kavanta, what do you mean? Oh wow, it's amazing how aligned they are. They make no sense. According to Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, who says that it even applies to metaltalin, what do you mean it even applies to metaltalin? Karka tanan. It says in the Mishnah, property, not metaltalin. Wait, what did I just say? Yeah, exactly. And Rav Yehuda Amarav, who says that it applies to karka like in the Mishnah, but the Mishnah says kolshu. Where does Rav Yehuda Amarav come up with this idea that it's kedei panasaso? It says kolshu tanan. So therefore, Rav Yosef says, I actually don't understand anything. If you say it's karka kedei panasaso, so I get karka, but kedei panasaso, where do you get that from? And if you say metaltalin, bichlal, where does metaltalin come from? And it says karka in the Mishnah. So Abaye says to Rav Yosef, V'choleicha detani karke davke. So now Abaye pushes back against Rav Yosef and he says, wait, one second, Rav Yosef, you're being very literal here. You're saying, well, it says karka, how can it apply to metaltalin? It says kolshu, how could it apply to kedei panasaso? Abaye pushes back and he says, look, karka doesn't always mean only karka, it could also mean metaltalin. Kolshu doesn't always mean any amount, it could mean a specific amount. In this case, kedei panasaso. So first he says, right, what? Wherever it says karka, it means only karka, specifically karka. But we learned in the Mishnah in Peah. Hakosiv kol, and we learned it in Masechta Gittin as well. Hakosiv kol nechosiv la'avdo yotze ben chorin. That if a person gives everything he owns, all of his property to his eved, well, the eved is his property. He's giving all of his property, including the eved, to the eved. I.e., the eved is a free man now. Right? So if a person gives everything, all of his property to his eved, so his eved gets all of his property, including himself. He's now a free man. Right? So yotze ben chorin. Shi'er karke kolshu. However, if he gives everything to the eved except for a certain amount of property, doesn't say how much, but a certain amount of property, well then, lo yotze ben chorin, the eved doesn't go free, because an eved is compared to karka. An eved is compared to karka, and if he's saying certain property without specifying which property, certain property is not being given to the eved, well, maybe the certain property is the eved. And therefore, because we don't know, the eved cannot go free. Reb Shimon Omer says, Reb Shimon la'olam hu ben chorin. Says Reb Shimon that the eved does go free, ad sheyomer kol nechosai nesunin lefloni avdi chutz me'echad me'ribo sheboin. Says Reb Shimon, look, if he says that he's giving everything to the eved except for a little bit of karka, the eved goes free. However, if he says I'm giving everything to the eved except for 1/10,000th of my property, then the eved doesn't go free, because maybe the 1/10,000th is the eved. So in that case, it does not go free. Now, V'amar Rav Dimi bar Yosef, says Rav Dimi bar Yosef, V'amar Rav Elazar, also metaltalin shir etzel eved, v'lo also metaltalin shir etzel ksuba. And says Rav Dimi bar Yosef, name of Rav Elazar, that by an eved, when the Tanna Kama says that if he gives everything to his eved except for a bit of karka, the eved does not go free, because maybe the karka is the eved and he's not getting himself. The same would apply to metaltalin. That if he says I'm giving everything to the eved except for a bit of metaltalin, the eved would not go free, because an eved, while he's compared to karka in certain ways, right, in terms of like kinyonim, but at the same time he's not karka, he moves around, right? People recognize that an eved moves, and therefore it could also be considered metaltalin. And therefore if he says that I'm giving everything to the eved except for a little bit of metaltalin, the eved would not go free either, according to Rab Elazar. So we see there that when it says karka, right, the Tanna Kama says that if he gives everything to his eved except for a little bit of karka, the eved does not go free. The same thing would apply to metaltalin as well. So we see that when it says karka, it doesn't dafka mean karka. And therefore also, Abaye asks Rav Yosef in our Mishnah, when it says that if he leaves for himself karka, it could mean also metaltalin. So what's Rav Yosef's problem? When we said below also metaltalin shir etzel ksuba, but by ksuba, however, this isn't necessarily relevant to our Gemara, but the Brisa quotes it, so we'll explain it. We had mentioned in Yesh Nochalin that if a person includes his wife in the inheritance with his sons, right? So if he says that his wife is going to inherit together with his sons, well then she no longer has any claim to collect her ksuba, because she's collecting the part of the inheritance instead. So that, however, would only apply to property. If he gives her property together with the rest of the sons, but if he gave the sons the property, but gave her metaltalin, she would still be able to collect the ksuba. So therefore, when we say that if he leaves property for his wife in the inheritance, then she'll get that instead of the ksuba, that's only karka, that is not metaltalin. But we saw that by the eved, karka was also metaltalin. So we could say in our Mishnah as well that if he gives away everything as a gift, but leaves for himself, as a man hashchim, but leaves for himself a bit of karka, that could also include metaltalin, says Abaye, and therefore that would also explain Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, who says it includes metaltalin as well. But Rav Yosef pushes back against Abaye, and he says, Hosam bedinu tilo lesne karka. So Rav Yosef pushes back and he says, no. 1 second. Abaye, you're trying to prove from the Mishnah in Peah by the Eved, right? When he says that he gives everything to the Eved, so the Eved goes free. So Abaye, you're trying to prove from that Mishnah that since it says, but if he leaves a little bit of, if he says everything goes to the Eved except for some karka, the Eved does not go free. And there it applies not just to karka but also to metaltalin. So Abaye, you're trying to argue that whenever it says karka, it could also include metaltalin. Rav Yosef says no. that's specific to that scenario because there was an earlier Mishnah that mentioned karka. But dinu delalis karka, really there in Peah, in the Mishnah Peah, it should not have mentioned karka because it does also apply to metaltalin. But v'aydi the Tana Reisha, but because an earlier Mishnah had said, Rabbi Kiva says Rabbi Kiva, karka kolshu, that when you have any amount of karka, chayav is bepeya, so you have to leave the corner of it for the aniyim, or bikurim, you have to bring bikurim from it. V'lichtov aleim pruzbul, right? We say that if Shimon lends Ruvain money and then comes Shemitah, so the Shemitah is ksafim and the loan is voided. However, if Shimon can they can write a pruzbul. But you can only write a pruzbul if it's a loan that's backed up by property. So we say that if Ruvain has any amount of property, then that's enough to be able to write a pruzbul for it. And also, as we mentioned earlier today, quoting the Mishnah in Kedushin, that nechasim she'ein lehem achrayis niknim nechasim she'esh lehem achrayis. That when you acquire property, you could also acquire metaltalin with it. That's any amount of property. Because if you acquire the property, whether with kesef, whether with shtar, whether chazaka. So mishumachi katani karka. So that's why the Mishnah in Peah by the Eved, when he gives everything to his Eved except for some karka, it mentions karka even though it includes metaltalin as well, just to be consistent with the earlier Mishnah. But that's the only reason why it says karka, but it really should say metaltalin as well, or should include metaltalin as well. But Rav Yosef argues in our Mishnah, there's no reason why it had to say karka if it also meant metaltalin, and therefore, says Rav Yosef, I don't understand why in our Mishnah it would include metaltalin, that if you leave some enough metaltalin for him to live off of. Says Rav Yosef, I don't understand why it would include metaltalin. I don't understand Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba. And v'chol heicha the tani koshu leis leishura, and then Abai continues his question. Right, first he asked the question about karka, arguing that it should include metaltalin. Now he says by kolshu, that kolshu should include a shear as well, right? Because Rav Yosef's question against Rav Yehuda was, I don't understand why Rav Yehuda is saying karka k'dei parnasaso, it says kolshu. But Rav Yosef, but Abaye asks Rav Yosef, when it says kolshu, can't that also include a specific amount, such as in our case k'dei parnasaso? V'atznam, we learned in a Mishnah in Chulin apparently. Reb Dosa ben Harkinos Omer, chomish rechelos gozos mana ufaris chayavos. Reishis Agez, you give the first shearings of your sheep to the kohen. So if you have 5 sheep, and each sheep, and each sheep produces a mana ufaris, which is apparently a litra of a chatzi litra, of wool, well then it's going to be chayiv in Reishis Agez. V'chacham Om say the chacham chomesh rechelos gozos kol shein, that 5 sheep that have just any amount of wool. We say v'chama kolshein. How much is a kolshein? Omar Rav says Rav manu ufaros uvavadshe yuhu mechumashos. It's a total of a mana ufaros as long as each sheep has at least 20% of a. Right, we're talking about 5 sheep. Each one has to have at least 1/5 of that mana ufaros. So we see that even though it says kolshu, it actually is a specific amount. So therefore, Abai wants to argue that when our Mishnah says karka kolshu, how much is a kolshu? Kedei panasaso, it's a specific amount. But again, Rav Yosef pushes back. Hosam bedinu de lo lisnei kolshu. There, it really didn't need to say kolshu. Because it isn't really a kolshu, it's a specific amount. So why did it say kolshu? By the Ka'amar Tanakama, Shi'ur Rabba, well, since the Tanakama had given a specific share, a larger share, of Mana Ufaros, so Amar Iyu Nami Shura Zutra. So you also mentioned a shear, right? If the Tanakama was mentioning a shear, so you also mentioned the shear, kolshu. Right? Siruzuta kari lo kolshu. He called it a kolshu. But really there shouldn't have been a right. So because the Tanakama mentioned a large shear, so he mentioned a smaller shear and he called it a kolshu. But that's only really relative to the earlier shear. But in this case, if it meant kidei panasasu, we should have just said kidei panasasu. Okay, that was daf kuf mem tes of Masechta BavaBasra. Okay, we learned some halachos about shchiv mira. If he sells everything and then he survives, does he get what he had back? It depends if he still has the money or not. We said, can he just say, my property belongs to so-and-so, be believed? We had the story with Isser Giora, and apparently, yes, you can say that the money belongs to so and so and he's believed. And then we talked about the shir, right? When the Mishnah says that if he leaves over a karka kolshu, well, then the gift would stand. So what does karka kolshu mean? Right? We said that it can mean kidei parnasaso. We said that it could be even metaltalin. Rav Yosef had pushed back against both of those, right? To say that it's metaltalin, he pushed back against that. He pushed back against saying it's kidei parnasaso. So yeah, okay. So I guess maybe, yeah, the shaila is, do we actually paskin like that or not? I don't know. Do we go based on Rav Yosef who pushed back? I don't know. Peace out.